Today is June 18th. I'm Serena, and welcome to the Seven Streams Bible Reading Method. Well, we're in for a treat today. We are starting the book of Leviticus. Well, you may or may not think it's a treat, but the great thing is that it is pretty straightforward, albeit there are some strange things, and sometimes it can seem just a bit repetitive sometimes. But it will help us to understand the rules and regulations for the things that were required for the Israelites. So we're going to read from the Message this week, and we'll be covering chapters 1 through chapter 6, verse 7. Leviticus chapter 1. God called Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting. Speak to the people of Israel. Tell them, when anyone presents an offering to God, present an animal from either the herd or the flock. If the offering is a whole burnt offering from the herd, present a male without a defect at the entrance to the tent of meeting, that it may be accepted by God. Lay your hand on the head of the whole burnt offering so that it may be accepted on your behalf to make atonement for you. Slaughter the bull in God's presence. Aaron's sons, the priests, will make an offering of the blood by splashing it against all the sides of the altar that stands at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Next, skin the whole burnt offering and cut it up. Aaron's sons, the priests, will prepare a fire on the altar, carefully laying out the wood, and then arrange the body parts, including the head and the suet, on the wood prepared for the fire on the altar. Scrub the entrails and legs clean. The priests will burn it all on the altar, a whole burnt offering, a fire gift, a pleasing fragrance to God. If the whole burnt offering comes from the flock, whether sheep or goat, present a male without defect. Slaughter it on the north side of the altar in God's presence. The sons of Aaron, the priests, will throw the blood against all sides of the altar. Cut it up, and the priest will arrange the pieces, including the head and the suet, on the wood prepared for burning on the altar. Scrub the entrails and legs clean. The priest will offer it all, burning it on the altar, a whole burnt offering, a fire gift, a pleasing fragrance to God. If a bird is presented to God for the whole burnt offering, it can be either a dove or a pigeon. The priest will bring it to the altar, wring off its head, and burn it on the altar. But he will first drain the blood on the side of the altar, remove the gizzard and its contents, and throw them on the east side of the altar where the ashes are piled. Then rip it open by its wings, but leave it in one piece and burn it on the altar, on the wood prepared for the fire. A whole burnt offering, a fire gift, a pleasing fragrance to God. When you present a grain offering to God, use fine flour, pour oil on it, put incense on it, and bring it to Aaron's sons, the priests. One of them will take a handful of the fine flour and oil with all the incense and burn it on the altar for a memorial, a fire gift, a pleasing fragrance to God. The rest of the grain offering is for Aaron and his sons, a most holy part of the fire gifts to God. When you present a grain offering of oven-baked loaves, use fine flour mixed with oil but no yeast, or present wafers made without yeast and spread with oil. If you bring a grain offering cooked on a griddle, use fine flour mixed with oil but without yeast. Crumble it and pour oil on it. It's a grain offering. If you bring a grain offering deep fried in a pan, make it of fine flour with oil. Bring the grain offering you make from these ingredients and present it to the priest. He will bring it to the altar, break off a memorial piece from the grain offering, and burn it on the altar, a fire gift, a pleasing fragrance to God. The rest of the grain offering is for Aaron and his sons, a most holy part of the gifts to God. All the grain offerings that you present to God must be made without yeast. You must never burn any yeast or honey as a fire gift to God. You may offer them to God as an offering of first fruits, but not on the altar as a pleasing fragrance. Season every presentation of your grain offering with salt. Don't leave the salt of the covenant with your God out of your grain offerings. Present all your offerings with salt. If you present a grain offering of first fruits to God, bring crushed heads of the new grain, roasted. Put oil and incense on it. It's a grain offering. The priest will burn some of the mixed grain and oil with all the incense as a memorial, a fire gift to God. If your offering is a peace offering and you present an animal from the herd, either male or female, it must be an animal without any defect. Lay your hand on the head of your offering and slaughter it at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Aaron's sons, the priests, will throw the blood on all sides of the altar. As a fire gift to God from the peace offering, present all the fat that covers or is connected to the entrails, the 2 kidneys, and the fat around them at the loins, and the lobe of the liver that is removed along with the kidneys. Aaron and his sons will burn it on the altar, along with the whole burnt offering that is on the wood prepared for the fire, a fire gift, a pleasing fragrance to God. If your peace offering to God comes from the flock, bring a male or female without defect. If you offer a lamb, offer it to God. Lay your hand on the head of your offering and slaughter it at the tent of meeting. The sons of Aaron will throw its blood on all sides of the altar. As a fire gift to God from the peace offering, present its fat, the entire fat tail cut off close to the backbone, all the fat on and connected to the entrails, the 2 kidneys, and the fat around them on the loins, and the lobe of the liver which is removed along with the kidneys. The priest will burn it on the altar, a meal, a fire gift to God. If the offering is a goat, bring it into the presence of God. Lay your hand on its head and slaughter it in front of the tent of meeting. Aaron's sons will throw the blood on all sides of the altar. As a fire gift to God, present the fat that covers and is connected to the entrails, the 2 kidneys and the fat which is around them on the loins, and the lobe of the liver which is removed along with the kidneys. The priests will burn them on the altar, a meal, a fire gift, a pleasing fragrance. All the fat belongs to God. This is the fixed rule down through the generations, wherever you happen to live. Don't eat the fat. Don't eat the blood. None of it. God spoke to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, when a person sins unintentionally by straying from any of God's commands, breaking what must not be broken, if it's the anointed priest who sins, and so brings guilt on the people, he is to bring a bull without defect to God as an absolution offering for the sin he has committed. Have him bring the bull to the entrance of the tent of meeting in the presence of God. Lay his hand on the bull's head and slaughter the bull before God. He is then to take some of the bull's blood, bring it into the tent of meeting, dip his finger in the blood, and sprinkle some of it 7 times before God, before the curtain of the sanctuary. He is to smear some of the blood on the horns of the altar of fragrant incense before God, which is in the tent of meeting. He is to pour the rest of the bull's blood out at the base of the altar of whole burnt offering at the entrance of the tent of meeting. He is to remove all the fat from the bull of the absolution offering, the fat which covers and is connected to the entrails, the 2 kidneys, and the fat that is around them at the loins, and the lobe of the liver which he takes out along with the kidneys. The same procedure as when the fat is removed from the bull of the peace offering. Finally, he is to burn all this on the altar of burnt offering. Everything else, the bull's hide, meat, head, legs, organs, and guts, he is to take outside the camp to a clean place where the ashes are dumped and is to burn it on a wood fire. If the whole congregation sins unintentionally by straying from one of the commandments of God that must not be broken, they become guilty even though no one is aware of it. When they do become aware of the sin they've committed, the congregation must bring a bull as an absolution offering and present it at the tent of meeting. The elders of the congregation will lay their hands on the bull's head in the presence of God, and one of them will slaughter it before God. The anointed priest will then bring some of the blood into the tent of meeting, dip his finger in the blood, and sprinkle some of it 7 times before God in front of the curtain. He will smear some of the blood on the horns of the altar, which is before God in the tent of meeting, and pour the rest of it at the base of the altar of whole burnt offering, at the entrance of the tent of meeting. He will remove all the fat and burn it on the altar. He will follow the same procedure with this bull as with the bull for the absolution offering. The priest makes atonement for them, and they are forgiven. They then will take the bull outside the camp and burn it just as they burned the first bull. It's the absolution offering for the congregation. When a ruler sins unintentionally by straying from one of the commands of his God which must not be broken, he is guilty. When he becomes aware of the sin he has committed, he must bring a goat for his offering, a male without any defect, lay his hand on the head of the goat, and slaughter it in the place where they slaughter the whole burnt offering in the presence of God. It's an absolution offering. The priest will then take some of the blood of the absolution offering with his finger, smear it on the horns of the altar of whole burnt offering, and pour the rest at the base of the altar. He will burn all its fat on the altar, the same as with the fat of the peace offering. The priest makes atonement for him on account of his sin, and he's forgiven. When an ordinary member of the congregation sins unintentionally, straying from one of the commandments of God which must not be broken, he is guilty. When he is made aware of his sin, he shall bring a goat, a female without any defect, and offer it for his sin, lay his hand on the head of the absolution offering, and slaughter it at the place of the whole burnt offering. The priest will take some of its blood with his finger, smear it on the horns of the altar of whole burnt offering, and pour the rest at the base of the altar. Finally, he'll take out all the fat, the same as with the peace offerings, and burn it on the altar for a pleasing fragrance to God. In this way, the priest makes atonement for him, and he's forgiven. If he brings a lamb for an absolution offering, he shall present a female without any defect, lay his hand on the head of the absolution offering, and slaughter it at the same place they slaughter the whole burnt offering. The priest will take some of the blood of the absolution offering with his finger, smear it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and pour the rest at the base of the altar. He shall remove all the fat, the same as for the lamb of the peace offering. Finally, the priest will burn it on the altar on top of the gifts to God. In this way, the priest makes atonement for him on account of his sin, and he's forgiven. If you sin by not stepping up and offering yourself as a witness to something you've heard or seen in cases of wrongdoing, you'll be held responsible. If you touch anything ritually unclean, like the carcass of an unclean animal, wild or domestic, or a dead reptile, and you weren't aware of it at the time, but you're contaminated, and you're guilty. Or if you touch human uncleanness, any sort of ritually contaminating uncleanness, and you're not aware of it at the time, but later you realize it, and you're guilty. Or if you impulsively swear to do something, whether good or bad, some rash oath that just pops out, and you aren't aware of what you've done at the time, but later you come to realize it, and you're guilty in any of these cases. When you are guilty, immediately confess the sin that you've committed, and bring as your penalty to God for the sin you have committed a female lamb or goat from the flock for an absolution offering. In this way, the priest will make atonement for your sin. If you can't afford a lamb, bring as your penalty to God for the sin you have committed 2 doves or 2 pigeons, one for the absolution offering and the other for the whole burnt offering. Bring them to the priest, who will first offer the one for the absolution offering. He'll wring its neck, but not sever it. Splash some of the blood of the absolution offering against the altar, and squeeze the rest of it out at the base. It's an absolution offering. He'll then take the second bird and offer it as a whole burnt offering, following the procedures step by step. In this way, the priest will make atonement for your sin and you're forgiven. If you can't afford the 2 doves or pigeons, bring 2 quarts of fine flour for your absolution offering. Don't pour oil or incense on it. It's an absolution offering. Bring it to the priest. He'll take a handful from it as a memorial and burn it on the altar with the gifts for God. It's an absolution offering. The priest will make atonement for you and any of these sins you've committed, and you're forgiven. The rest of the offering belongs to the priest, the same as with the grain offering. God spoke to Moses. When a person betrays his trust and unknowingly sins by straying against any of the holy things of God, he is to bring as his penalty to God a ram without any defect from the flock. The value of the ram assessed in shekels, according to the sanctuary shekel, for a compensation offering. He is to make additional compensation for the sin he has committed against any holy thing by adding 20% to the ram and giving it to the priest. Thus the priest will make atonement for him with the ram of the compensation offering, and he's forgiven. If anyone sins by breaking any of the commandments of God which must not be broken, but without being aware of it at the time, the moment he does realize his guilt, he is held responsible. He is to bring to the priest a ram without any defect, assessed at the value of the compensation offering. Thus the priest will make atonement for him for his error that he was unaware of, and he's forgiven. It's a compensation offering. He was surely guilty before God. God spoke to Moses. When anyone sins by betraying trust with God by deceiving his neighbor regarding something entrusted to him, or by robbing or cheating or threatening him, or if he has found something lost and lies about it, and swears falsely regarding any of these sins that people commonly commit, when he sins and is found guilty, he must return what he stole or extorted, restore what was entrusted to him, return the lost thing he found, or anything else about which he swore falsely. He must make full compensation, add 20% to it, and hand it over to the owner on the same day he brings his compensation offering. He must present to God as his compensation offering a ram without any defect from the flock, assessed at the value of a compensation offering. Thus, the priest will make atonement for him before God, and he's forgiven of any of the things that one does that bring guilt. Lord, your concern for us, for every phase, for every step, every friendship, every meal, your concern for us is comprehensive, and forgive us for failing to understand the depth of your love. Bring us closer to your heart, the consuming fire that refines us. Amen. As we have started Leviticus today, be encouraged, as our aim is for us to better and more deeply understand God's care for us. The overarching ethic in Leviticus is that a holy God wants us to be with Him and to become like Him, so there can be pure fellowship, like with Adam in the Garden of Eden. God's holiness is wholly pure. God's character is not mixed with evil. The yin and the yang we find in Asian folklore does not exist with God. He does not have an evil side. Granted, he has control over evil, yet it does not control him. And God will eventually eradicate and punish all evil permanently. But God being holy, he loves us and wants us to be like him, so to be better with him. A great theme in Leviticus is that there is to be no mixing. We are like this. We demand that our loved ones not be mixed up with unsavory characters. We demand fidelity from our betrothed. We demand there be no dirt on the strawberries on our dessert pie. We demand pure, clean, washed lettuce for our salads. We insist the sand in our children's sandbox be clean, without compost or cat litter. And we do not want sand mixed in our salad, not even one grain. Are we not like God in this regard? We demand pure milk in the bottle for our babies. A little bit of dishwater mixed in is not okay. We demand pure gasoline for our car. We want it free of water or other junk. We demand pure water to make our coffee with. Or, hey, do you mind just a few drops of chlorine? Just to kill the moss that might be left from a mug you drank in that hasn't been washed in 5 months? Okay, yes, that's nonsense. We want purity. We know what purity is, and we insist we be served pure purity. The oddity about human character is that we're often demanding trueness of those around us, but we don't demand it for ourselves. Many around us and in our culture think it's good to be bad, so we can have a good time, We trust that this trek through Leviticus reveals the excitement of purity. So in that regard, I made a choice not to be bored when going through Leviticus. Well, yes, sometimes it may read like a maid's checklist cleaning a hotel room, or, well, imagine going to a hotel room and mold is here and there and smelly washcloths are turning colors in the corner from 3 guests ago. The sheets are sticky and there's other various matters unattended to. To this, the maid responds, "Oh, I don't follow the checklist for cleaning. That's too confining. That's really boring. I'd rather just follow my feelings and just as I go through the room. The most important thing is that when I leave the room, I just need to feel good." Well, that's unacceptable. And that's basically what Leviticus is teaching us, is the rigors of clean living. Now, to people who haven't heard of this before, this is news. And that's what God is doing. He's establishing what it is. So just see it for what it is, that God's depth of care for us is refreshing. So specifically about today's reading, there are 5 offerings in this reading today: the burnt offering, grain offering, fellowship offering, sin offering, and guilt offering. They are found accordingly in the 5 chapters we read today and in the start of the 6th. The burnt offering was to be completely consumed on the fire. The best was to be brought to God. It was for worship, signifying commitment and surrender to God, for unintentional sin. There was more mention of this in Leviticus 6 and 8 and 16. We are to bring our best and first to God today and offering it totally to Him. The grain offering was grain or flour or olive oil, bread, what was grown, hence the income or increase from each one. This was to be brought to God as a voluntary act of worship. It created the occasion for Israel to pause and recognize that God in His goodness provides, and we are therefore to respond with our devotion to Him. Let's worship God and remember the bounty He gives. Not worship the bounty, then hoard it and then forget God. Otherwise, we just become greedy people who just try to get all we can. But then anyone who threatens to take anything from us or just wants to dig in any of our cans gets a violent reaction from us. Grain offerings from our bounty help us to be gracious, godly people. The fellowship offering involved us bringing an animal without defect to be shared plus a variety of breads. This was a voluntary act within the worship and service of our lives. It contributed to the communal meal. This was to be eaten together. It kept God in the center of the fellowship. These feasts were joyous events, and God and happy, devoted hearts surrounded the table. Just contrast this to the food orgies and saturnalia feasts gone amok in the Greek and Roman world that would follow a few centuries later. The filth and vomit and trash-ruined rooms and wasted food was disgusting at these pagan rituals. We either keep God in our fellowship or our fellowship goes bad. The sin offering was required to give for specific sin, be it unintentional. There must be confession, forgiveness, and cleansing that occur. Sins were being dealt with in a whole new way now. No blaming, fighting, getting ugly, or the world's way. Repeat the sin until it doesn't feel like sin anymore. They say, who cares who gets hurt? Well, no, that's not right. Sin was dealt with before God. Wrongs made right, and it would end there. The size of the offering reflected the status of the person religiously or economically. The guilt offering was for sin that required restitution. There was to be a ram sacrificed. This was mandatory for atoning the unintentional sin. There must be cleansing from defilement, plus a 20% fine added on to right the guilt. So overall, this may appear to be tedious and laborious. Well, it's simpler than law school. Getting right with God makes things automatically go right with others. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Well, I hope that you learn to love the book of Leviticus this year. SevenStreamsMethod.com is the home port for this podcast. So tomorrow, we will transition to the nation stream and continue the story in 1 Kings. Know that nothing can separate you from the love of God. Until tomorrow, I'm Serena, sailing with you down the 7 streams.